Welcome to the Rustic Garden Homestead. Today's video is all about starting basil indoors. Basil can be really expensive to buy as plants and, as an herb cut at the grocery store. And you can really grow it pretty easily at home, and you can grow it for the entire summer. I have plenty of videos on that. But today I want to show you how to seed start it and just talk about how to have success starting that indoors, along with parsley, cilantro, and dill. Those are the four main herbs that I use. Now it's really early. It's only the middle of January. It's too early to start basil right now to get outside. But you can see that it's growing really nicely, and I can harvest it and use it in the house. So I can grow it, December, January, February, March indoors and still use it, and then plant them a little bit later in the year, like around, I don't know, March 15th or something. Grow the transplants, get them outdoors. I'm also going to show you how to grow those herbs in foil baking trays. It's just an alternative, and it's a really nice way to grow them if you want to grow plants larger and harvest them while they're under your grow lights. So let's get started with basil. Basil can grow really well indoors. A couple things you want to keep in mind is that if you're going to grow it to, get to a good size and harvest indoors, you really want to use a larger container. I sell these three types of containers at my seed shop. If you were to grow basil in the standard cell, that's perfect for letting it grow about 8 weeks and then getting it out into the garden. With this much space, the roots are going to get constrained, and it's not going to really grow bigger into larger plants for like harvesting indoors. I've started everything that you see here in these larger 4 cells, and the roots are starting to get root bound. I'm going to show you that. The plants here have been growing since October 17th. So it's just about 12 weeks from putting the seed down. Everything's going to take 7 to 10 days to germinate. They like to germinate at about 65 degrees Fahrenheit, 18.3 degrees Celsius. Now, mid-January right now, too early to really grow these indoors to get them out into the garden. But I have to grow proper plants so you have something to look at that we can, discuss. And then you would get these started about 8 or 9 weeks before they would go out into your ground. Basil likes the warmth. It doesn't want to be in cold soil. So you're really thinking about that. Parsley doesn't mind the colder soil. Cilantro can actually take the colder soil. And then dill doesn't like cold soil but does okay. But dill and basil really want to get into warmer soil when that top 2-4 inches is at 65 degrees, 18.3 degrees Celsius. The parsley and the cilantro can get in when the temperatures are cooler, when the soil temperatures are cooler. But generally speaking, you want these to grow about 8 weeks indoors, 9 weeks from putting the seed down. If you're germinating in a room that is colder than 65 degrees Fahrenheit, it may take longer. They may need to grow a little bit longer before you get them outdoors. So the plants, let's go with the basil. Benefit of starting basil indoors is, one, there's dozens of varieties of basil: cinnamon, lemon, lime, a spicy basil, Thai basil, purple basil, sweet basil. You can buy those seeds for about $2 a pack. You'll have enough basil seeds to grow for years. You can store them and keep them. And remember, when you go to buy like a basil plant at the big box stores, they're like $4, $5, $6. So you're going to save a ton of money by doing this. You don't need to buy new seed every year. If you're interested in purchasing seeds, I sell tomato and pepper seeds at my seed shop for $1.75 a pack. Everything else is $1.50 a pack, and that includes basil and different herbs. So let's get to planting in the standard cells like you see here, and then the second part of the video will be about growing in those foil baking trays. Now again, these are 12 weeks old. That's really too long to be growing these indoors for transplants. This one's starting to form a flower head. These plants should be bigger at 12 weeks, but they have, root systems, let's pull some out, that are really, coiled, and this plant is beginning to get constrained, and it's only going to get really as big as it has root space to grow, which means out in the garden they get really tall. They'll get huge, but when they're getting coiled like this, they're going to stop really growing the upper growth. They'll still have nice leaves, and you could harvest this a little bit, but this is not the way to go for container size for growing indoors for large plants. So your basil you really want to get into the garden around 8 weeks. So if you're in a container this size, your standard container, after germination, about 6 or 8 weeks, you want to get them out into the garden. The roots are going to coil. The plants will stay green as long as you keep feeding them, but they're just not going to get bigger, and then they're going to shift over to flowering. So 6 to 8 weeks in here from germination or putting the seed in. If your seed starting area, again, is like at that 65 degrees Fahrenheit, it should be fine. In a larger cell like this, these are, again, 12 weeks old. They should be bigger, constrained. Around 8 weeks, 9th week, you really want to get them into the garden. I'm going to be starting the herbs in these larger cells. The basil can stay in here for a while. They're going to get nice and large, you know. I don't know if I can get onto camera, but they'll get to a good size as long as you're keeping them fed and watered. And this is a decent size for growing basil plants indoors for harvesting. But you would really want to go to a larger container. I'll talk more about that at the end of the video when we're going over the foil baking trays. But with something this size, your basil can stay in here 8 to 10 weeks. You want to get them outdoors by then. 12 weeks is too long. The key to starting anything indoors is to give the plants, basil's fragile now because it's not used to the UV rays of the sun. So if I rush these out, maybe the soil temperature is perfect, I go and put them right into the ground later this afternoon, they're going to be dead as soon as they get a full day of sun. The sun will actually burn the leaves and kill the plant off. You have to incorporate into your 6, 8, 10 weeks of growing time 1 week to 10 days of 7 to 10 days of getting the plants acclimated to the outdoors. That means they have to get used to the UV rays of the sun. 15, 20 minutes day 1, a little bit longer day 2, longer day 3, you get the idea. If it's a cloudy day, they can stay out, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. But they must have a period of time to get used to the sun, or when you put these all outside, because they've been grown indoors and they're protected and have never felt the sun, they're going to be damaged and they're going to die off. All right, so let's get to the basil planting. The seed starting mix I make myself, just did a video on it. I will link that video, how to make 4 seed starting mix recipes. Plenty of videos on how to hydrate all this with boiling water, kill off fungus gnats. I will put all those videos in the video description if you want to learn more about that if you don't know that already. So we're going to start with the basil. And again, these plants are beautiful, constrained. So, they're not going to do much more than start to flower. I like using painter's tape so that I can just put the date on here, easy to use. And for basil, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to put in more than 1 seed. I don't really suggest planting 1 seed and then hoping it germinates. I like to put in, maybe 3 seeds, something along there. That was too deep. You're just going down about 1/4 of an inch. I like using a pencil. And I just do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I would do the same thing for a small cell. I would just do 1, 2, 3. I'm going to thin them down to 1 or 2 plants if they all come up. And you get a lot of basil seeds, so it's not like you're wasting seeds. And if you noticed in the basil that was used for the examples, there's 1 or 2 plants in the cells. And that's all I'm really doing. I don't know if you can see, but just a light depression. Looks like a number 3 on a die, on dice. Basil seeds are really small. And I'm growing them in the larger containers because it's only January 15th. So I want to grow these more, well, let me get that in there, grow these more to size indoors so that I can harvest and use it. Really small. And I just go, you can even put 1 or 2 seeds per hole. Just drop them in. Don't be afraid to overseed this. I mean, worst case is they all come up and you have to thin them or remove a couple of plants. And I'm putting 1 or 2 seeds right into each of the holes there. Let me just do that real quick. Now, the beauty of this is it's really easy. You can plant all kinds of different varieties of basil this way that you're not going to find in the big box stores. A plug of basil, like, the containers are a little bit larger than this when you buy them. They're like $5 or $6. They're expensive to go buy cut in a grocery store. So if these were just, say, we had to go buy these. Seed pack, if you go in a store, it's going to cost you $2 or more. If you buy it from me, it's going to cost you $1.50 a pack. But if we were to go buy it, it'd be $5, $10, $15, $20, $25, $30 for these plugs. We can make this for really, I don't know, with all the supplies and the starting mix and all that, let's just say 50 cents a plant, and that's higher than it probably really is. I just scrape some of the starting mix around, press everything in, and the basil's good to go. These will go into the tray like this. I will fill this tray about 1/4 of the way with water. The water will wick up. This will be nice and moist. You know, I wait for the top, and again, I have hundreds of videos. I actually have thousands of videos on gardening, dozens of videos on seed starting indoors. Once this is a dark brown and saturated with water, I wait till it dries to a light brown before I water again. It's always going to dry from the top down. So when this is a light brown, there's still plenty of moisture down here. You don't want to keep the basil kind of sopping wet. You don't want dark seed starting mix 24/7. It's too saturated. Give it a drying out period, especially while the seeds are young. As they get bigger, they're going to appreciate more moisture. But you really want this to go from a dark color, let's see if I have a tray, to a light color. Sometimes it's hard to tell. But from a dark color to a nice light color, this is dry all the way through. That's how you know that the seed starting mix is drying, dries from the top, moisture's down here. A couple of days you're gonna have to water again. Another trick is once this is saturated, pick it up. It's gonna be really heavy. When it gets to the point where it's getting really dry and the moisture's maybe only down here at the bottom, it's gonna be light. You're gonna know to water. And roots are gonna go down, they're gonna access the water. That's one of the biggest mistakes, and that's why I'm stressing it, people make with seed starting, is they keep their starting mix too wet for that first really week to 3 week period before the seeds germinate and really get growing. So the basil is set up. Let's get over to the next herbs. I'm going to plant some basil up real quick in these smaller cells. I'm going to be doing a video. Please subscribe and follow me. I do a couple videos every week in real time. I'm going to be doing a video just comparing the size of the basil in these medium containers, you know, versus the larger containers. But it's the same thing, 3 quick dots, about 1/4 inch deep. You don't have to over worry about the depth. These are going to germinate on the surface, 1/8 of an inch deep, 1/4 inch deep. I can't remember exactly what 1/4 inch is, but like maybe 0.6 centimeters or something like that. You just don't have to over worry about it. The starting mix is nice and loose. The plants are going to push through there. Unless for some reason the seed needs to be pressed on the surface, you got a lot of leeway. All right, so the basil's in. So now we're going to go with parsley. Using the larger containers because I want these as transplants. They grow a little bit more slowly. They can stay in here until the temperatures get a little bit warmer out there. The parsley can take a frost. Cilantro can actually take a frost. And dill can take a little bit of a frost, though it prefers warmer soil. Cilantro is kind of interesting because the seeds are larger, but these are seed pods. So there's a couple cilantro seeds in each one of these pods. So for cilantro, I do 2. 1, 2, again, about that 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm just going to take 1 seed. If you want, you could put 2 in, but that's going to be plenty. So 2 seeds, and let me put these down. Sometimes people crack the pod. They feel that's better germination. I find, you know, nature has figured it out well before we were born. So I just put the seed pod in there and let it do its thing. And then cilantro will look something like this. This is again after 12 weeks. And I don't know if it's constrained. Let's look. Yeah, so it's starting to get, you know, pretty constrained in there. The size gets inhibited when those roots fill up the entire cell. So I'm giving these a larger cell. And let me switch this because I put cilantro in first. This why I like the painter's tape. It's real easy to take on and off. Okay, so parsley is going to go into there. Parsley is a slower grower. I'm going to put 2 holes, 2 seeds per. They look like that. And these are the herbs that I use the most. And you know what? 3 seeds are falling into some of these holes here. You're better off thinning than you are just trying to get 1 seed to go. All right. So the parsley's in. Dill, same thing. About 1/4 of an inch. These are larger seeds. You're looking for dill that's not broken or crushed. Something like that. Sometimes the seeds get broken. That's why I put in 2 or 3 into a hole. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, then 1 jumped up there. Let's push that in. And then just press them in. And that's all you need to do to really start basil, cilantro, parsley, and dill. Again, about 8 weeks growing time. Bigger cells you can grow a little bit longer. Parsley probably can grow indoors 10 weeks, 11 weeks, a little bit longer than the rest of them, but you're really kind of targeting about that 8-week period. Don't forget, everything has to be acclimated to the sun. Check out the video description. I'll put a video in there that talks about how do you identify when the soil's the right temperature outdoors. I think it's a very useful video. A little bit dry, but very useful. So if you want these plants to say go in, I'm here in Maryland Zone 7, on May 1st, I would count back 8 to 9 weeks. That's going to be the end of February, March 1. I would plant all these as you just saw, and then they will grow perfectly fine. They're going to be perfect for my transplants come the beginning of May. And that's kind of how you figure it out. You pick the date you want them to go in the ground outdoors, and then you count back 6, 8, 10 weeks depending on what you're growing. All right, let me set this up for the foil trays, foil baking trays, and then we'll talk about growing in those. These are your standard half foil baking trays. What's important with these is you want at least a 2-inch depth. That's 5 centimeters. These were started on February 2nd. So this is about 6 weeks worth of growth. And we have cilantro, basil, parsley. Couple mistakes I made, and right after this I'll show you a couple videos of how these germinated and how they grew over the first couple of weeks. Couple of mistakes. So number one, you know, I set this up not to make mistakes. So you set up a tray like this, there's no holes in it, and I would just fill it to water to about there. And then this tray has drainage holes in the bottom. And then you would just gently sit this on there and it would float, and it's going to water from the bottom up. So as these were starting and growing, that's what I was doing. And, you know, I was like, all right, everything's growing well. Then I started watering from the top, figuring, hey, you know what, you're the rustic gardener, you know what you're doing. Well, I was pouring the water right into the center. I killed off one group of basil that was right there because it was staying wet for too long. And you can see the effects. This plant here is all kind of beat up because it's just been staying sopping wet. This one did okay for whatever reason. I think because my shelf is tilted a little bit that way. So the water was pulling over to this side, killing off, you know, the plant. So, you know, lesson learned. Stick with making sure that you bottom water and you give these a good drying out period. And then don't water. If you're going to water from the top, you have to water evenly, like all the way through, and not oversaturate it like I did by pouring it on here. So we have the cilantro. Looks great. You know, I do have 3 plants in here. You could actually grow this way, and then you would just get a knife and you would cut, you know, into the soil, pull out the clump. You have a beautiful transplant. If you want to grow for harvesting indoors, this is what I recommend. Cilantro gets really big, you know, but you're going to be harvesting it pretty quickly. I would recommend 2 plants. Right in here, you know, 2 basil plants. There are 3 growing here, so I'm actually just going to yank these out. They're beat up, they're ugly, they're not growing. The root systems of these 3 plants will take over here. This is going to be a nice large basil plant. The parsley over here isn't as big as I want because when I was watering from up here, it wasn't seeping up to the plant. So these guys basically got dehydrated. So by not kind of watering using the flat method that I just showed you, watering was uneven. And sometimes you get too much water, it kills off the plant. Sometimes you don't get enough, they struggle. But everything is back on track. This is a great way to grow if you want to grow these plants to a good size and harvest indoors. It's been 18 days. The parsley, basil, cilantro are all up. It's going to really take anywhere from 10, to 18, 21 days for everything to germinate, depending on the temperature in your house. Doing 3 different herbs are going to germinate at different rates, but they're all up now. Top of the soil is nice and light. The tray, let me just rephrase that, nice and light brown color, meaning it's not saturated. And then the tray itself is pretty light, meaning a lot of the water has come out. So we want to bottom water. I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. Simply take out the tray. We're going to put in some water. Let me grab that. Fill it about a quarter of the way. You don't need to add fertilizer yet. The plants are still small. Maybe next time we'll add in some fertilizer. By bottom watering, which is the easiest way, we're not splashing everything around. Set the tray right in here. It's going to float. Water's going to come up through the holes. This will go from a light brown to a dark brown. That's how you know everything is saturated nicely. Plants are watered, tray's watered, they're good to go. Today is December 30th. They've been growing for about 28 days. We have cilantro, basil, parsley. The basil looks like it's growing a little bit slow. We'll see what happens with that. So here is the parsley. I want to thin these down now to just 1 plant, whatever one you want to keep. You have a bunch in here, so you just want to be careful. And nothing fancy with the thinning, just getting in. You could cut them with scissors if you're worried. When you pull them this way, there is a chance that you're damaging the roots of the plant left behind, but they're pretty young and they should recover. So I'm just going to thin them down to 1 plant. I'll do the same thing with the cilantro, and we'll see how things go. All right, and one more tip. Well, first, please subscribe and follow me. I'll show you how to start just about everything indoors. Doing a whole series this year. I have different leafy greens started right in there. Coming up top, more cool weather crops, brassicas and stuff like that. They're all growing now for videos. Leafy greens, I'm going to be doing a series on growing the leafy greens in the same containers. We've got peas, and I think that's broccoli, cauliflower. All kinds of different plants growing in here, and I will teach you how to do that. As you're growing transplants, you don't have to put out like 15 basil plants at once. You're going to have more basil than you need. So when these are ready to go outdoors, again, make sure you acclimate them to the sun. I will put these into the ground where I want, or into pots, and then also put down some new seed in different places. So as these grow and mature, or if something happens and they get damaged, you have the seeds in for new plants, and then it's basically called succession planting. Every 4 weeks, 6 weeks, you could start new transplants, you could drop new seeds, but by doing that, you'll ensure that you have a continued harvest through the summer of the basil, cilantro, parsley, and dill. Thanks so much for watching. Please check out my blog at therustedgardenblog.com, and please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com. Thanks again for watching.